Okay, I think I need to hurry a little bit, or I'm going to miss the coffee break, but anyway, here's my title. Oops, what happened? I'm missing a slide. Oh, here, well, they're reversed. Ackerman talked, and most of the people in this session have talked about how we work towards positive development of achievement, and I'm going to spend a little time on the opposite end. What happens, how it happens that kids sort of fall off the rails and get demotivated from school. School basically fills the lives of adolescents in our society. They spend most of their hours during the day there. That's the source of most of their social interactions. Even their non-academic activities are often connected to the school, and they get a lot of feedback on where they sit within their social milieu from their school. Both parents and society at large tell them that doing well is important to later success in life, but to some what they are asked to do seems really useless and arbitrary, and they find it hard. So my question here is, how do relative success and failure in school impact personality change? This is my favorite academic achievement-related cartoon. The caption reads, "Why can't you be more like little Hester Prynne? She's getting all A's." What happens when a kid goes through several scenes like this, whether the person heckling them, if you will, is a parent, teacher, whoever? In the process of trying to answer that, I'm going to give a big plug for Tellegen multidimensional personality questionnaire, which has to be the most used but unpublished personality scale that exists out there. I think it does, for my purposes here, a much better job of addressing the role of personality than the five-factor model would or could. It also happens to be the data I have available, but okay, I'm going to be talking about, first of all, alienation and aggression. There are two markers of what Tellegen calls the negative emotionality personality factor. And in particular, there are two that are not captured well at all in the five-factor model. Both of them, I hypothesize at least, may often develop in response to the perception that one doesn't meet the expectations that are being placed on one. I think kids can really dig themselves into holes with these two aspects of personality in particular. By that I mean that the more alienation or aggression you express, the more negative responses you get from the people around you, and the more then you become alienated and aggressive and so on. Both of these tend to increase in early adolescence and then decrease in early adulthood. Here are some sample alienation items, and you can see that they're the kind of thing that there really isn't anything in the five-factor model that tends to really get at them well. Alienation covers hostility, self-pity, suspiciousness of others, a bit of paranoia, blaming others for your situation. It's an ugly aspect of personality. Similarly, aggression covers retaliation, enjoyment of violence, willingness to trample others. You're going to strike back when hit. Two other scales that are in the multidimensional personality questionnaire are stress reaction and well-being. Stress reaction is the third marker of the negative emotionality personality factor, and well-being is a marker of the positive emotionality personality factor, in Tellegen's way of looking at personality. Stress reactivity is an awful lot like neuroticism, but it's bled of some of the overtly negative emotionality that neuroticism always carries with it. It's captured better, though, in the five-factor model than well-being, which is really purely I enjoy life. In the five-factor model, that I enjoy life tends to be intertwined with, it's captured in extroversion, and it's intertwined with overt sociality. And in Tellurgan's model, you don't have to be social in order to enjoy life. Again, I think that both of these aspects of personality may often develop in response to perceptions regarding whether you've met expectations, with well-being, of course, being something that's created when you feel that you have, and stress reactivity being something that's more likely to be created when you feel like you haven't. Stress reactivity increases overall in early adolescence, then levels off. Well-being tends to be the opposite. And maybe that's sort of a commentary on the pressure cooker that kids in our society live in these days. Here are some sample stress reaction items, and you would recognize some of these things as things that are typically measured in neuroticism, but they're stripped of a little of the overt negative emotionality. I'm easily rattled at critical moments. That means I'm all ajar. I'm not necessarily upset, but I am on edge. And here are some of the sample well-being items, and you can see you don't have to be social in order to think the future looks bright and to be cheerful and to be enthusiastic about the things you're doing, especially maybe the latter one, or to feel you have an interesting life. And control is the fifth aspect of personality from the Tellurgan scale that I'm going to be looking at here. It's a marker of the constraint personality factor. It's also not well captured by the five-factor model. Conscientiousness would be its natural home, but it's very much about specifically planning, and it's stripped of achievement, which conscientiousness usually has some associations with achievement. I wanted to use something that was stripped of achievement because I want to look at an aspect of personality that doesn't have achievement built into it and how it might contribute to achievement. Overall, it tends to increase throughout adolescence and early adulthood. Here are some sample control items. And you can see it doesn't have any overt relation to achievement. This one I think kids can use for digging themselves out of holes. As your ability to plan for yourself increases, you may be able to improve your ability to just pay attention to your schoolwork. And as you do get positive feedback for having paid attention to your schoolwork, you can be reinforced to pay yet further attention to it. The sample that I'm working with is the 11-year-old cohort of the Minnesota Twin Family Study. It's over 800 pairs of twins. They were recruited using a population-based method, so it's nicely representative of the population of Minnesota, which is not necessarily the population of the United States, but it is at least representative of the population from which it was drawn. I have assessments of personality at ages 11, 14, 17, and 25, and assessments of grade point average at ages 11, 14, and 17, and then I've worked in educational attainment at age 25. The grades were self and parent reported both, and I averaged them at ages 11, 14, and 17, and the level of attained education was reported by the participants themselves at age 25. The parents reported the personality at age 11, but it was self-reported at the other ages. I also have a measure of IQ, which you'll see contributes to the whole thing, but really kind of gets lost in the background. This is the model I'm using. It's a latent change model that was developed by Jack McCardle, and the features of it are that it measures an overall level and slope, but it also allows for separate evaluations of the impact of one period on the next period. So you've got an overall pattern that's being estimated, and also the wiggles in it that take place along the way. And the paths that I've labeled in green and red here are the ones that I was particularly interested in. They're also, in this case, they were significant, with the green ones being, the heavier lines indicate that they're more strongly significant than the red ones, which were less strongly significant. So overall, just to get it out of the way, because it's the same in all the ones that I'll show you, IQ at age 11, first of all, contributes to the level of GPA at about exactly the way you'd expect it, 2.55. But it also contributes along the way. The kids who have higher IQs tend to be able to maintain their grade point average better at each step along the way, so that every time they get a little better grade, they tend to respond a little better, and if they're getting a little worse grades, it tends to matter less to the next point in time. And that's true at each step along the way. And it's true for each of the personality characteristics that I looked at. In addition to that, grade point average has a sort of similar effect. Those with higher grade point averages at age 11 had higher increases in achievement over time. Within time intervals, though, higher achievement at one time point was associated with lower achievement at the next. So that's kind of working at cross purposes to what I just said, but temporarily as opposed to long term. And that effect got stronger with age. It was slightly less than the association between overall intercept and slope at age 11. So it's, you know, it's the wiggles around it. It's not the overall pattern. But it surpassed it quite a bit by the time they reached age 25. This is the model for alienation's effects, and so there are particular patterns like that with respect to alienation too. Those with higher alienation at age 11 had higher increases in alienation over time, so they're spreading again on that. But this was offset within each time interval by stronger regression to the mean. So again, the temporary effect dampens the long-term effect. In addition, higher grade point average at one time point augmented the decrease in alienation to the next time point. So in other words, if they got good grades at one time point, then they dropped in alienation. But if they got poorer grades, then they tended to become even more alienated. So that's exactly the kind of response I was thinking might be out there. That when you get negative feedback on how you're doing in school, you get more of this ugly characteristic where you're blaming other people and you're saying that everyone's out to get me, and the more you feel that way, then the more likely you are to, therefore, even put even less effort into the next school period. Aggression looked almost identical to alienation. Stress reaction looked very similar to alienation and aggression, but stress reaction itself had no effect on grade point average, whereas there were joint effects for alienation and aggression. They were affecting each other. And the salutary effects of high GPA at one point on stress reactivity at the next were weaker. So stress reactivity just wasn't doing as much. And there were no effects of IQ on stress reactivity. Here's what that looked like. Oh yeah, I wanted to just, so here's what alienation and achievement look like, and here's what stress reaction and achievement look like. So you're missing the red lines, and the magnitude of the green lines was lower with stress reaction. For well-being and achievement, the models looked almost identical, except the signs were reversed. In other words, where stress reactivity is negatively associated with achievement, well-being was positively associated with achievement, but in the same manner. Control and achievement, though, was a little bit different. Control at one point acted to increase achievement at the next point throughout, and the salutary effects of high GPA at one point on control were weaker, but in the opposite direction. In other words, control was acting to help to dig them out of holes. The more controlled they became, the more their achievement increased, and the more their achievement increased, the more controlled they became. But the effects of achievement on control were less than the effects of control on achievement. So they were building themselves out of holes through the increases that were taking place in control. So I'm thinking in terms of you've got developmental stuff going on with personality and developmental stuff going on with grade points, and you can think about them each as separate networks, but they've got cross paths between them. And the cross paths between them are important in influencing the next round of development, each in the one, from the one to the other, and vice versa. This model separates overall level and slope from intermittent changes, and it's really nice in that regard, because if you think about development, there always are overall patterns as well as intermittent wiggles around them. The intermittent changes in grade point average did affect the development of alienation, aggression, stress reactivity, and well-being. And the intermittent changes in alienation and aggression also affected development of achievement. And at the same time, the intermittent changes in control affected the development of achievement, and obviously in the opposite direction there. So thank you.